Good day, everyone. Welcome back to the room. We understand it's a flying lunch, and we have a packed program for today, but we are very much also looking forward to this side event. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Giezendanner, and I work as a senior researcher at UNIDIR's Conventional Arms and Ammunition program, and I look very much forward to moderating this side event. I believe it's been mentioned this morning that over the past decades, the United Nations role in providing assistance, different types of assistance and support to member states and other stakeholders for through-life weapons and ammunition management has grown and has also evolved significantly. The United Nations has an important role not only in providing global and inclusive fora, but also in providing support and assistance to states, their national authorities, and other stakeholders for strengthening frameworks, approaches, and practices for through-life weapons and ammunition management to prevent diversion, proliferation, misuse, as well as the risks posed by unplanned explosions. Since 2012, which was the first time when WAM was really introduced internationally and in official United Nations documents, an increasing number of states and other stakeholders within and outside the United Nations have adopted and used an increasingly and even more comprehensive approach to weapons and ammunition management. Today, several UN entities support such a comprehensive approach and promote the integration of WAM and related supply-side or demand-side approaches and activities into their contributions to broader peace, security, and development agendas and objectives. This has, in turn, led to more requests from member states for UN system entities to support the strengthening of national weapons and ammunition management institutional and operational capacities, and therefore exploring options and avenues for promoting cooperation, coordination, coherence, and cohesion at the national level, but also on other levels, has become increasingly important. Now, with this side event, it aims to really provide different perspectives from across the United Nations system. And I am very pleased and honored to be surrounded by distinguished experts and representatives from different departments, offices, sections, and units of the United Nations. I will briefly introduce them, but before to maybe say a few words about the key questions that we may be looking at and that may be guiding us during the side event. First is to provide information also on the different types of weapons and ammunition management and related support and assistance, guidance, and tools that different UN entities offer and provide to states and other stakeholders. We may also be hearing about some options or avenues that could be pursued by those interested in promoting a whole of system approach, if and where needed and where a context may requires such an approach for support and assistance provided to member states and their national authorities and other stakeholders. And thirdly, maybe what may be some of the benefits or opportunities for further exploring or promoting a targeted and appropriate integration. Now, with this, briefly introducing our side event, some of the key guiding questions, I now should turn to introducing our distinguished speakers and colleagues with us here today. starting with, on my right-hand side, Nora Allgaier, Political Affairs Officer with the Conventional Arms Branch of the United Nations Office for Disarmament Affairs, and since a few weeks back at home in Geneva and with the Geneva office. She has previously also worked for the DDR section of DPO, and she has also been the deputy to the secretary of the recent OEWG process that has resulted in the Global Through Life Framework for Conventional Ammunition Management. I have on my left-hand side Simonetta Grassi with us. Simonetta is the chief of the Firearms Trafficking section at UNODC and has a distinguished career with a wealth of prior experience serving amongst others in Colombia and Ecuador, and also in the Caribbean Regional Office. She manages the Global Firearms Program and also serves, as I understand, as the secretary to the UN TOC established working group on firearms. I then have on my immediate right-hand side, Mr. Osama Khateeb, who has joined us from the United Nations Mine Action Service Libya program and the UN Mission for Support in Libya, UNSMIL. And he has over 20 years of WAM experience, first in a national capacity as an ammunition technical officer and specialist, and he has also previously served on several United Nations missions, so we're delighted to have him here. On my left-hand side, Thomas Kontogeorgos, who is the chief of the Disarmament, Demobilization and Reintegration section at the UN Department of Peace Operations, and he chairs, together with UNDP, the Interagency Working Group on DDR. Thomas is amongst the speakers here with wealth and so much experience that I may not be doing justice and credit, but just to mention that he has served over 24 years and has over 24 years of experience with different United Nations missions and in different contexts in the area of peace and security, civil affairs, humanitarian work, conflict resolutions, and many more. So we're delighted to have Thomas with us here today, and he's accompanied by Sharatze Husni, a member of Thomas's team, and who works across a department and office in an integrative effort that has happened within the United Nations in recent years. And last but certainly not least, and I'm not sure if for the conventional arms community the speaker needs an introduction, of Mr. Daniel Prins, who is also with us. Daniel Prins is the chief of UNDPO's OROLSI Security Sector Reform Unit. And he has a wealth of experience in military confidence building measures, regional integration, arms regulations, and multilateral negotiations. He previously served as the chief of the Conventional Arms Branch of UNODA in New York, and he also has been the secretary to the negotiations of member states leading to the Arms Trade Treaty, and he has prior experience with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands, in which capacity he, amongst others, also was chairing the group of governmental experts on the issue of brokering, some, I believe, 17 years back now. With this, dear participants, I have hopefully introduced our distinguished representatives and speakers, and I would like to open this side event by maybe first handing over to our colleague Osama, who has joined us from Tunis to bring in sort of a perspective, a first-hand perspective from the ground and from a national context on weapons and ammunition management. Some of the challenges faced at that level, but also some of the opportunities and the important ongoing activities in that context. So Osama, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Hardy. Actually, I would like first to thank UNIDIR for organizing this event and bringing us all together in here. I would start by giving a short background about WAM in Libya. So since 2011, civil war which saw the overthrow of the Gaddafi regime, the central government in Libya has struggled to impose its authority on the nation, and continued political instability and violence has ensued. The situation continues, and many factions within the country are competing for power. On the other hand, considerable quantities of ammunition and explosives are located in Libya, originating from both the stockpile of the Libyan armed forces and unexploded ordnance and ERWs. Some of these are dating back to the Second World War, as well as other more recent conflicts. Much of it is outside the control of the Libyan government and often in locations close to main centers of population. Against this background, UNSMIL is an integrated special political mission with the mandate defined in the latest UN Security Council Resolution 2702, which expresses concern over the impact of the conflict on neighboring countries, including with regards to the threats arising from the illicit transfer, destabilizing accumulation and misuse of weapons, and the flow of armed groups and mercenaries. Further expresses concern at the threat posed by the diversion and proliferation of arms and ammunition in Libya, which undermines stability. And finally, calling on the key Libyan institutions with support from the United Nations to take steps to secure and effectively manage stockpiles, clear EOs and ERWs from hazardous areas, and protect civilians from the risks of unplanned explosions at munition sites. What have been done to support Libyan authorities in WAM since 2011? Stockpile management and local infrastructure, of course, temporary solutions so far. Collection, disposal, including destruction, awareness-raising activities and risk education, gender-sensitive, responsive approaches. The challenges in Libya include cyclical outbreaks of armed groups fighting, lack of political will for disarmament, real numbers and quantities of weapons and ammunition are not easily obtained and verified, high number of weapons circulating in the community, and the lack of legal framework governing weapons ownership. UN in Libya launched Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework for 2023 to 2025, which stipulates that UN support to SSR includes the development of a security sector strategic framework and the professionalization and empowerment of unified state security institutions. UNSDCF output 1.2.3 is security sector institutions operating under civilian oversight are more unified, resourced, capable, and functional, including professional, unified, and accountable defense and security forces. Indicator C is for Libyan entities to be equipped with capacities to effectively implement arms and ammunition management. Indicator D is the establishment of coordination mechanism, including the Inter-Ministerial Committee for Arms and Ammunition management, a national mine action authority, and a national mine action strategy and plan. So what can be done in the near future, hopefully? Awareness raising activities regarding the risk associated with the possession of arms and ammunition, supporting the state security institutions to develop SOPs, marking and record keeping of weapon and ammunition, rehabilitation or construction of new storage facilities, review of national legalization regarding weapons possession, considering unplanned explosion at munition sites at the storage locations, advocate with political leadership to move the militarized camps outside of the urban areas to reduce the risk to the civilian population, awareness raising activities regarding national laws to weapons and ammunition ownership, registration process by SSI for the weapons owned by civilians, and most importantly, engaging the political level to get its buy-in of all these activities and demilitarization of civilian areas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Osama, for sharing with us these perspectives and insights into the provision of support and weapons and ammunition management in that specific context. I think you have provided a number of key references there with regards to the efforts and integration of weapons and ammunition management into also broader agendas and objectives related to peace and security and also development. And one key point that I have noted and picked up was the reference to security institutions and more broadly governance. And so in the understanding of weapons and ammunition management as the exercise of governance and supervision and the management comprehensively of weapons and ammunition throughout their life cycle, this governance aspect and the comprehensive approach. And maybe this is an opportunity for me to hand over to Daniel Prins from your side to contribute here to the discussion and share with us your thoughts and your insights also. Daniel, over to you. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. We're very happy to be here. Yes, a few sort of loose remarks perhaps on this topic, and I'll try to sort of focus on how political this kind of work is. Of course, it's easy, or maybe not easy, but you know, it often is addressed as a technical issue, but I would like to underline the political side to it, and with it, the development relevance of the topic that we're discussing. I'll start with an example that we have seen being documented, and that is that some armed conflicts, we have actually, from academics, from research, we have proof that, for instance, in Central Africa, some armed conflicts have fizzled out due to a lack of ammunition. Just the lack of ammunition being available led to the conflict halting, simply because fighting became very difficult without having ammunition. I'm very sure that this is more of an exception than a rule, but it does illustrate the importance of working on these topics so that, in particular, illegal ammunition doesn't fuel the conflicts that it often does. Preventing diversion is about having your systems in order, making your institutions function. I think another but very different angle is the experience that I've heard from an ammunition management expert who told me that somewhere in Southeast Asia, he came across a place where there was a military storage facility for ammunition, but it was really a shed out in the forest, full of ammunition, with a table in the middle. And on the table, he said, when I entered with national officials, on the table in this shed filled with ammunition was an ashtray. And he told me, he said, hey, you guys, why is this ash? You're not smoking inside here, are you? And then the reply was, well, only when it rains. And so, you know, it shows that there is so much work to be done, and you can divide it into, you know, work needs to be done on knowledge, on capacity, knowledge, certainly also on procedures. And all of this falls under, you know, improving governance. And that is what increasingly we see as, you know, the field that we need to work on. It may be a bureaucratic field, but at the same time, it's deeply political. Functioning security institutions are absolutely crucial for stability. And the bedrock of functioning institutions is their financial maturity and sustainability. There's money involved, and money often makes government run better if the money is embedded into procedures that make sense. But where money is involved, it's always also political. As I mentioned, it's about the distribution of power, and it links quickly with corruption, with elite capture, and similar problems. In 2014, another example of what I'm trying to talk about, 2014 in Mosul, that's what the second largest city in Iraq. The city was overrun by ISIS fighters because only a few national troops were actually defending it. But their general, who was in charge of paying the salaries of these troops, had earlier claimed to his defense minister, having 40,000 men under him defending the city, and had received the salaries for that many for years. So you see there, you know, a poorly designed salary system where the salaries go through the general to the troops led to a, you know, dramatic security disaster. You know, work on improving the security sector is a political and development topic. Three challenges that I can name now. First, and most obviously, that conflict-affected countries often obviously struggle to manage their security expenditures. There are often firewalls built into defense funds. It may be that defense spending is not included in the national budget. We still see that quite often. Or that defense spending is not fully compliant with international standards for public financial management, or not subject to parliamentary oversight. The lack of transparency in security spending sharply increases the risk of corruption. That's a no-brainer as well. And that undermines the effectiveness of security institutions, weakens societal trust. Ultimately, that's the point that we do stress, also based on experience and research. Ultimately, in the medium and long term, secrecy doesn't work in favor of governments. Our second challenge is about security that is often not included in national financing frameworks for sustainable development. That has to change. A national financing framework for sustainable development outlines what needs to be financed to advance the development goals at the national level. And so even when weapons and ammunition management is prioritized in national prevention plans and prioritized in national recovery plans and priorities in national development plans, it must also find its place in national financing frameworks for sustainable development. Otherwise, it will only remain words. And third, international assistance is often fragmented and uncoordinated and may not meet national needs. Donors do not use a common methodology to record support to security sector reform, including weapons ammunition management. They do this for all other areas of support, from environment to health, infrastructure, education, but not on security because it hasn't been agreed to in the OECD. And not agreeing to a common methodology in support to security institutions places a burden on national oversight and accountability mechanisms who cannot compare the apples and oranges of different donors. And in addition, development aid is insufficiently focused on strengthening the essential functions of a state, such as public financial management and human resources and parliamentary oversight of security institutions. Anyway, to tackle these challenges, the UN Secretary General has recommended some what we consider bold steps, integrating security reforms into national development plans to allow for transformation over time is certainly a key one. Also important, conducting what are called public expenditure reviews, PERs, public expenditure reviews, specifically of the security sector. Obviously always under national leadership. It's not that we come in and say, now we'll do a public expenditure review of your armed forces and police and whatnot. No, you work with governments to sort of develop an approach under the leadership of the government with assistance mostly of the World Bank and the UN if needed, if wanted, to do that analysis of the public expenditure streams, so to speak, within the sector. A public expenditure review is an essential diagnostic tool for us, which provides an insight into the money spent on security, what it is spent on and how. For instance, we've seen a government, this is out of experience, a government keeping large ammunition stockpiles, which are expensive to safeguard properly, but not realizing that years ago, the weapons that would use this type of ammunition have already been sold abroad. Public expenditure reviews will bring that to the surface and we'll see and will result into much more efficient financial management of the sector. And so the UN works with countries that are interested on improving on these items, as I said, in close partnership with the World Bank. We're also engaging on policy and programming options to improve public financial management in the context of security sector reform. We do that in a number of countries, and we have done, I won't list them. My last remark is that, as I mentioned in the beginning, we really need to place the issues that we are working on in a development framework. It's crucial for stability and peace. Our ultimate goal, as far as I'm concerned, could be to further improve the objectives on security sector reform, including weapons ammunition management, in the umbrella development framework of the United Nations. In other words, when the UN's Sustainable Development Goals are up for renewal, and that's only 6 years from now, it would be great if in the future global development priorities, we could solidly anchor security sector governments, including WAM. And by doing so, we would ensure that much more resources will become available and that people across the continents can better engage in governance processes, are better protected, can realize their ideals of growth and prosperity. So yeah, that's for the back of our heads for the moment, but quickly we will need to start preparing for what comes after 2030. Before you know it, we're there. And as far as I'm concerned, this should be part of our conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Daniel, for this. I think that without further moderation or commenting from my side, I wish to hand over to Thomas. I'm sure that from these from the intervention by Daniel, you will be able to connect. So
yeah, though it seems that we are still competing with the little sandwich out there, looking at the attention in the room, but I hope that more colleagues will join us. First of all, let me thank UNIDIR for, and congratulate, of course, UNIDIR not only for the invitation, also for the opportunity to hold this first ever event on WAM, which I hope is not going to be the last one. Before handing over to my colleague Shahzad, who is our project manager when it comes to an innovative joint project between our office, the Office of Disarmament, Demobilization, Reintegration, and ODA colleagues, Office of Disarmament Affairs, let me make 3 quick points to what concerns the work of DDR. The first relates, as Daniel already spoke, about more and more DDR not being recognized only as a technical undertaking, but more and more being recognized as part of the political process. And as such, DDR will influence and will be influenced by political dynamics, including the area of weapon and ammunition management. So understanding the political dynamics that influence DDR processes requires knowledge of the historical, political context, the actors and stakeholders, armed and unarmed, and also the local, national, regional, or even global conflict drivers. If you ask myself about Libya, I always say that in Libya we have 3 political processes. One political process at the global level, one at the national level, and one at the local level. The second point I want to make is about how DDR has been re-engineered to adapt to new political, operational, and programmatic challenges, and above all, to promote tailored context-specific approaches. So next year, we're going to celebrate 35 years since the first time DDR was supported by the United Nations. That was in Salvador. And since that time, we have seen the emergence of different DDR generations. According to some practitioners or even academics, we have seen more or less 4 different DDR generations, with the last one being focused on violent extremist groups and terrorist organizations and promoting, along with other frameworks, the neutralization and entry points with those groups. One of the main reasons, or few of the main reasons, when it comes to the emergence of different DDR generations, and this links certainly with WAM, which I will come to my last point, is about the conflict. The conflict has changed over the last 15 years. They have become more complex. They involve vast numbers of non-state armed groups. I remember that at some point participating in an event with ICRC in the context of Syria, they have calculated more than 3,000 active armed groups. That was back in 2015. What we also see more and more is that the armed groups operate locally, nationally, regionally. And last but not least, member states mandate interventions, I'm talking about the Security Council, which are not at the end of the conflict, but during the active conflict. And that, of course, has immense complications for a DDR process. My third and last point, as I said, I'm going to be telegraphic, is about DDR itself and the approach that the Secretary General adopted on behalf of the UN system back in 2019. So the approach has evolved from being a linear, sequenced program and has become a process when it comes to addressing the entire peace continuum. So national and international actors, and more importantly for us, the national actors are the ones that need to select the most appropriate measures and tools based on a thorough analysis of the particular context, both of the actors and both of the conflict drivers. So the new approach to DDR offers tailored activities and tools. Weapon ammunition management is one of them, amongst others, that are implemented before, during, and after the conflict. So this means ultimately that we have moved away from the so-called one-size-fits-all, meaning D, and R, and under the new approach, actually one size fits no one. I will finish with one term which has not been mentioned so far in this symposium, which is interim security arrangements, something that is more and more we are looking in contexts when it comes to increasing trust between conflict parties. It involves temporary measures that use weapon ammunition management as a conflict building measure and open up the space for a dialogue that eventually leads to a political agreement. Thank you. Shahrazad will give the highlights on the program itself.
Yes. Thank you so much, Thomas. I think we can go to the next slide. Yeah, so as Thomas said, we provide different types of weapons and ammunition management related support and assistance, guidance and tools to member states and to other stakeholders through a joint initiative that we have been implementing with ODA over the past 7 years, thanks to a support from Germany. And the objective of the initiative is to support DDR practitioners in designing and implementing disarmament and weapons and ammunition management activities in line with international arms control standards and guidelines. So this is done by, next slide. This is done, thank you. This is done by developing expert resources and guidance, but also by providing training and technical assistance to member states and to UN entities who request it. And the initiative also seeks to promote the sustained and systematic integration of WAM in the UN's work on peace and security. And we are very happy to witness that in the past few years, weapons and ammunition management has been established as an integral part of DDR processes. Next slide. I know we don't have much time, so I'll try to be quick and go through the different kind of support that we provide under this joint initiative. Under the first pillar, we have developed and strengthened tailored tools in terms of WAM in DDR settings, including the centerpiece of the project, which is the UN Handbook for DDR Practitioners on Effective WAM in a DDR Context that was first published in 2018 in its first edition and in its second edition in 2021. And it provides DDR practitioners with practical guidelines on how to design and implement disarmament and WAM activities as part of integrated DDR processes. Through the project, we also contributed to the review of the integrated DDR standards, IDDRS, with updated IDDRS modules on disarmament and on transitional weapons and ammunition management. We also developed a new mosaic module on small arms and light weapons control in the context of DDR, based, of course, on the IDDRS to ensure consistency in guidance on WAM and DDR across UN standards. And lastly, we also developed an SOP in 2022 to assist UN missions in implementing efficient, safe, and secure DDR WAM processes and to facilitate their implementation by all actors involved in relevant operations. And just to outline that these resources, so the handbook and the SOP were already translated and are available in English, French, Spanish, and Arabic. And we are now finalizing the translation of the Mosaic module and the IDDRS modules into French, Spanish, and Arabic, thanks to a complementary Swiss funding. So you can see that we have established a strong framework on WAM, including transitional WAM, as part of an integrated DDR process, and now the focus is on the operationalization of this framework through a training that I'm gonna present in a few, and through the technical assistance opportunities that are available under this joint DPO ODA initiative. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I'll continue now with the training that we provide to DDR practitioners, but also to WAM experts and to policymakers. It was developed and first provided in 2018, and it is now offered as an annual training course, which aims to build the capacity of participants to implement the policy I just mentioned. For this training course, we collaborate with UNIDIR, with the Folk Bernadotte Academy, FBA, with AMAT, and with the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center. It's a very comprehensive training that includes WAM in its strategic policy and operational levels, including with scenario-based activities and with practical parts on weapons handling, registration, storage, and disposal. And also in the selection of participants, we make sure to have a group composed not only of UN entities, but also with international and regional organizations, non-governmental organizations as well, engaged in WAM in order to ensure diversity of perspectives. I think we can go to the next slide. And I'm going to now mention the last type of support that we are providing to member states and to other relevant stakeholders, which is the technical assistance. And this pillar of work can take many forms depending on the needs expressed by the member states or by the UN entity. It goes from a multi-partner technical assessment mission, which aims to provide recommendations on WAM at the strategic, policy, and technical levels, to identify also potential WAM activities as part of DDR processes, to targeted studies to enhance knowledge of weapons and ammunition dynamics in general. This technical assistance mechanism allows for flexible interventions and can also support with the mobilization of additional expertise, additional financial resources, as well as in the facilitation of partnerships in general. We can go to the next slide. And I will start here with Haiti, where we deployed the first technical assessment mission in 2019 in close collaboration with the BINU and with the UNIDIR and UNIDIR in support of the transition from a peacekeeping operation to a special political mission, BINU. And the mission led to the formulation of concrete recommendations, including the development of a national arms control framework in line with existing standards and guidelines. What I really want to highlight here, because we don't have much time, is that this assessment mission paved the way for an effective whole of UN approach to ensure the integration of arms control policy into the UN's work on peace and security. And the mission also demonstrated the value of a holistic and coherent approach on DDR and WAM processes. Several follow-up activities were organized after this assessment mission, and it also facilitated partnerships between BINU and relevant UN entities. And today, the project continues the facilitation of WAM support in Haiti, with a particular focus on the potential to complement community violence reduction programming, CVR, and DDR-related activities more globally. In addition to Haiti, we also provided remote support on weapons and ammunition management in Sudan, where we collaborated with colleagues from UNIDIR to undertake a research study on weapons and ammunition dynamics in Sudan in support of UNITAMS. And the objective was to develop an understanding of current dynamics and challenges related to weapons and ammunition and explosives, and also to identify priority areas for mandate implementation on WAM for UNITAMS. It was a very concrete contribution, as the report formed the basis for the mission when before, of course, the war, in developing concrete programs and activities together with the UN country team. In addition to Sudan, we are currently providing support to the National DDR Commission in Cameroon in producing its first manual of procedures on DDR, including on weapons and ammunition management. So basically, we have deployed there an expert selected by national authorities who is working with the NDDRC on this manual, which will delve into the concepts and processes of disarmament, while also identifying potential opportunities and gaps that could be addressed through a structured WAM approach. We also collaborated with the Lac-Tchad Basin Commission last year for a study that was finalized in October 2022 on weapons and ammunition dynamics with a focus on trafficking and a review of arms control initiatives and national WAM capacities in the 4 countries of the sub-region, as well as an assessment of frameworks on conventional weapons and ammunition control, including potential gaps and opportunities. And we formulated recommendations that were specifically addressed to national authorities, but also to the LCBC, the Lac Chad Basin Commission, to the Multinational Joint Task Force, MNGTF, and the UN, and also the wider international community, especially on integrating WAM into national and regional strategies. And I will end with Somalia, where we are currently conducting a two-phase study on weapons and ammunition dynamics. The first phase was finalized earlier this year and resulted in the production of a report, mainly based on literature review on weapon, ammunition, and explosive dynamics in Somalia, a stakeholder mapping, an overview of current DDR and WAM initiatives, and recommendations to consider in preparation for the second phase that we are currently implementing, based on the federal government of Somalia priorities. And this second phase explores the dynamics of weapons and ammunition in relation to potential threats associated with their possession by communities. And this second phase of the study recommends and promotes responsible community registration and storage of weapons through transitional WAM in community-based interventions in general. And this is all, of course, in support of the DDR program there, which is the defector rehabilitation program. So the final report is expected to be published beginning of next year. Still on Somalia, and in addition to the support provided through this study, we were able to participate at the request of the Security Council Affairs Division to the Somalia Benchmark Assessment Mission that was conducted in July 2023, earlier this year, and that aims to inform the Security Council in its review of the Somali arms embargo. And the final report, the report of this benchmark assessment mission was published earlier in September. And in addition to this, we are now regularly asked by SCAD, so the Security Council Affairs Division, to provide inputs and to contribute to their reports in general. Yes, I think that is all. And just to conclude, I just want to say that all these actions are closely coordinated with member states, with national and regional commissions, and of course with our UN DDR sections in the field, with UN entities, and also with all international organizations involved in WAM. And through the project implementation, we're also seeking synergies with other interventions. But as Thomas said, we keep in mind that many DDR components are now operating in very complex and often highly politicized environments, which influences the extent to which weapons and ammunition management can and sometimes cannot be leveraged as part of CVR or DDR programs in general. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to both Thomas for being with us and for sharing, including the points that you mentioned. I believe they're very important and have been noted also, and further adding to the discussion that we're having, and to Sharatze as well for the insights and updates on the most recent activities of the DPO and ODA joint program on WAM in transitional DDR contexts. With this, I think, and without further ado, I'd like to also provide hand over to Simonetta from UNODC to share from UNODC's perspective the contributions to the true life cycle management of weapons, including small arms and light weapons and their corresponding ammunition also, and other points that you may wish to share with the audience today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope you can bear with me. I'm the last speaker, so I hope you're not, the heads are not falling. Can I just see the next slide, just to see the next one? So as Hadi said, I come from the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, and from the Firearms Trafficking section. And I will speak a bit about what we are doing in this field, and also some thoughts about the UN whole of the system approach, which is something that I think is bringing us together and is worthwhile exploring. I have just 2 slides for you. So one is reflecting our integrated approach, and the other one is showing, I don't know if we can quickly show it and then go back to this one. Next slide. Yeah. So our firearms trafficking section has a program called the Global Firearms Program, which provides member states assistance in this area. And these are the areas where we are currently active and where we have also a presence. I think it's a good moment that I am allowed to speak after Daniel and Thomas, because in a way, the area that we deal with is closely linked both to the areas of work that are relevant for Thomas, so conflict and non-conflict situations, but also the whole broader aspect of security sector reform. So from our perspective, we deal with the issue of firearms both in the context of drugs and crime, meaning all the criminal dimension that is linked to it, but also in the context of threats to peace and security and development. We understand that the problem of illicit firearms cannot be looked at in a vacuum, in isolation, because in the real world, this problem is always coupled with other broader issues, be it ordinary crime, be it organized crime, terrorism, be it the presence of conflict or a post-conflict situation. And it goes, of course, hand in hand with governance, with the capacity, the institutional capacity of states to ensure the control over firearms throughout their life cycle. So maybe we can go back to the other slide. So in a nutshell, UNODC assists countries, or our section, because I should say our section, because UNODC is really a big animal with many heads and we have many areas that we cover. So let's say that the firearms trafficking section deals with the problem of assists countries in ratifying and fully implementing the firearms protocol, which is one of the 2 global legally binding instruments. Pierangeli mentioned it this morning because basically this protocol was adopted, taking as a starting point the CIFTA Convention and then building on it. And it was adopted in 2001 as a legally binding instrument that supplements the Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime. So you can see already where we come from. We deal with the issue in connection to crime, to organized crime, and links to other forms of like terrorism and other forms of crime. I said earlier that we try to take an integrated approach when we deal with this issue, when we support member states in implementing the protocol and what comes with it, meaning that we work on prevention, control or enforcement, but also on improving knowledge. And we believe that this is extremely important. It is, in order to address this problem, we see a need to have this integrated approach, because it is not enough to work only on policies or on legislation, or to focus only on some specific aspects, be it PSSM or collection and destruction, if we don't have the full answer, if we don't close the circle, as I always used to say. So as you can see on the screen, we have a 5-pillar approach in this integrated. This integrated approach tries to address the issue from different complementary entry points. And of course, this means helping countries in strengthening their legislation, their policies, their institutions. Without institutions that have it as a primary mandate to deal with firearms trafficking, we will never address the problem properly. Looking at it from a crime prevention perspective, what we see, and I will come to it in a moment again, we see that as long as the issue of firearms is just treated like, it's a tool, an instrument that is used to commit a crime, we will never have measurable or tangible results when in the area of really reducing illicit trafficking, illicit flows. Why? Because it will not be addressed by countries. So what we try to do is not only to align the legislation with the firearms protocol, where possible also with other instruments, so that countries or legislators don't have to look at it more than once. And we do that whenever we can in cooperation with other actors, so with regional partners, for example. In the Central African region, we're working with ECAS, with ECOWAS as well, but also to help countries having national action plan strategies that reflect on how they want to implement it. And that includes also looking at what kind of specialized institution they need. One thing that we are trying to promote a lot are integrated firearms centers, meaning pulling together the functions and the work that is often scattered even within law enforcement, but not only law enforcement. Whenever possible, we recommend to have this as a more operational center that brings also other institutions together on an operational basis, but that also brings together the functions and the capacity to pull data and information from all the institutions and the entire country. Because this is the other big weakness that we see, is that also information and data are extremely scattered. So without knowledge, countries cannot really address the problem adequately. And then we address the problem from the crime prevention and criminal justice perspective. So of course, all the preventive measures that are included in the protocol, and that in a way also, I don't want to say overlap, but coincide with that of other instruments, or from the work that we have just heard from colleagues before and who will also speak after me, meaning what is needed for countries to have a full control over firearms, parts and components, and ammunition. Of course, the record keeping, the marking, the safe storage. We focus in particular on the seized weapons, because they are the ones seized in a criminal context. They are the ones that are often not kept properly and at a major risk of getting diverted again. They are also the ones where the chain of custody is often broken by the improper way of managing them, which means that they are not useful then also for any judicial action. So this is one part of our work. We have seen then that one big weakness of many countries is the record keeping part. So over the past years, we have developed a registry that is being now rolled out in a few countries. And this is an integrated registry that allows countries to keep their data on not only the firearms, parts and components, but also other controlled materials. And that can be used both for legal and for illicit firearms. So, because often the module that is missing in many countries, or that is kept completely separated from the records on legal weapons, are the ones on the seized and confiscated ones. So this is not an off-the-shelf product, because it needs customization to the institutional framework of each country. But this is something we have been working on after several years of reflection, because we found, we saw that so many softwares are being donated here and there, but then often countries don't pay the license, lose the data, and often these are also scattered interventions. So we decided to go this way, and we are now implementing this in a few countries. And it is, of course, available to countries subject, of course, that they are interested. But as I said, that is not something that is just handed like that. It needs to be customized. Then the other important part of our work is, of course, the criminal justice approach. As I said, being the Office on Drugs and Crime, we are looking at this problem from that angle. And here we have developed, of course, tools. The aim of this big component of this pillar, which is the green and the blue one, is to really elevate the importance of practitioners to also look at the origin of where the weapons came from, who is behind this movement, and not just seize the weapon, because the easiest thing law enforcement officials can do is to take the weapon out of circulation, because it's not in the hand of their legal owner. And then they charge the person with illicit possession. But this is not enough, because basically the trafficking continues undisturbed below the radar. You're just taking some weapons out of circulation. You're not addressing the trafficking. So we try to work with countries on the entire chain, from detection to investigation and prosecution, to really change, to promote a paradigm change in the way law enforcement and prosecutors deal with this topic, and judiciary, of course. And that includes, of course, also supporting operational actions, promoting international cooperation, because if this is a transnational crime, then we need the countries to pull their information and their evidence together in order to address this transnational dimension, which is something that is not happening in most countries in the world. Most cases don't come to justice for trafficking, but for any other crime that is committed with the weapons. So this is basically our approach. And to conclude, as I said, we combine knowledge, prevention, and enforcement, because we have also started some years ago to collect data on illicit firearms. We published a study in 2020 in cooperation also with several partners. And we are now looking at launching a new global study that will look at how things have evolved over time, also with all the new technologies and the situation of COVID, how has this impacted on illicit flows? With this, I think it reflects pretty much the way we are working. Of course, we have developed specialized tools. I mentioned now the registry. We are also trying to approach the problem. We are working at national, regional, and global level, but we realize that we as international community risk to run always after the events, because there is one crisis after the other. So we are about to launch a new initiative, which we call, in short, the Hotspot Initiative, which aims to monitor but also provide rapid or early responses and provide the support also for longer term action in and around global hotspots. Because we see a need to not lose sight, to look only the tree and not the wood. And in fact, sometimes crises are even connected, or one can influence the other. And therefore I feel that we as community, we need to keep this global vision while acting at national, regional, and international level. It is also important not to forget about the forgotten crises. Somebody used this term, which I like very much. And then coming to the other point, and I think that leads me also to promoting a UN whole of system approach. And somebody has before me already mentioned some important aspects. The first of it is, of course, the lack of coordinated and coherent approaches. And this is unavoidable, considering that we are all depending on funding from donors, that we come from different mandates. So we look at the same issue from different perspectives, which also means that there can be overlap and duplication or even contradiction. And I think the moment is ripe. We are coming together. This is not the first time we are starting to discuss this possibility of introducing a little bit of coherence within the UN system, at least if not even beyond the UN system. There are some entry points, and several colleagues have already mentioned the different assessments, but there is not just one entity that does weapons and ammunition management assessments. So, of course, the excellent work that UNIDIR does with many partners is a very important guidance and I think a very strong basis for any future action. The mosaic tools that have been developed, UNODC also, we do also our assessments, and we focus on the criminal justice aspect as well. So this is, for example, something that we see is missing in the UNIDIR methodology. Then we like also very much, we should not forget, like entities like CTED also do their assessments, and they also call different partners to the table. So there is really a lot out there, and I think it would be interesting to explore how we can do something out of it, not following maybe one methodology, but develop together a common methodology and finding together also a way for the different agencies to optimize their scarce resources and also coordinate their work. And I always say, you know, we may have a broad mandate as other entities have as well, but it doesn't mean that we have to do it all in the same country. So we can build on our respective mandates, but also on the opportunities that one agencies may have more than another, or vice versa. And I want to conclude by mentioning that this has also been a concern for the Secretary General. As you know, there was an executive committee meeting early November, on 3rd of November, that was convened initially to discuss the issue of small arms and light weapons in the Caribbean, but then it became broader. And it was UNODA and UNODC were the co-pen holders, and other entities were invited, including UNIDIR, and others are already part of like DPO, UNDP. And I think this was an important meeting because it allowed, maybe for the first time, to address the issue in a propositive way. And there were actually a few interesting decisions that were taken. The one is that UN entities should try to work together on developing joint UN country and regional assessments, applying an integrated approach to weapons and ammunition, to also strengthen national and global data collection capabilities. And there is also linked to it also some concrete mandates, for example, to do some more research on the illicit flows, which is also something that we need to look at. So not losing sight of what's going on, of what the flows are, what the threats are that this represents for the country itself and for the region. And to work also towards possible, I mean, there are many ways to do it, but I think what could be interesting is to explore how we can make these decisions operational and not just to comply now with the request to report back, but to put the basis for something where we can really put the expertise of different entities together. And maybe this will also trigger synergies in terms also of funding, because we all struggle for funding. But what is worse is that when we all struggle for funding, we end up with unfair competition in a way. So if we manage to become more coherent together, I think it will also bring coherence to funding and to implementation, of course, which is our aim. I stop here because I think I've taken enough time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Simonetta. I think there are a number of very important points that you have shared there with us and with the participants and the audience. And without further ado, I've been taking note of some of the questions that came from the online forum. We may not at this stage and during this event have the time to address them all, but to mention also that there is a session later towards the end of this afternoon where we may come back on a number of key issues that are being raised. But there is one question which I may add here before and with handing over to Nora from ODA, a question that comes from the online participants about to what extent can the United Nations enhance regional cooperation on the management of weapons and ammunition, so that regional cooperation and regional level may be something that, Nora, during your presentation, you may also briefly touch upon and respond to. And with that, over to you.
Thank you so much, Hardy, and thank you to UNIDIR for organizing the side event and for inviting ODA to speak and also to provide us a space to discuss assistance of the UN on weapons and ammunition management. And I think it shows very nicely how we complement each other, our different perspectives on weapons and ammunition management. In my presentation, I have been asked to provide a little bit of an overview of the global assistance mechanisms that exist and that are managed by the Office for Disarmament Affairs, under which states can request and receive assistance, as well as to provide an overview of the standards and guidelines that we have and that we manage to support through live weapons and ammunition management. Let me start, next slide actually, and another slide please, I will go a little bit quicker. Let me start by introducing first two funding mechanisms that ODA manages or co-manages. This includes the UN Trust Facility supporting conventional arms regulations and the Saving Lives entity. Both of those trust funds have different scopes and functionalities, but they do complement each other. So let me start by UNSCAR. This is a funding mechanism that provides short-term and small-scale funding to projects, and those projects are implemented by civil society organizations, international and regional organizations, as well as non-governmental organizations. So if states would like to chip into this or take from this trust fund, they are suggested to work together with these organizations to implement projects. Every year there are around 15 projects that are funded through this mechanism with a submission of $100,000 to $150,000 US. All these projects support the implementation of WAM, normative and legal frameworks at the international and regional level, and promote the application of the Mosaic and the IATG, which are our standards. And then on the other hand, we have Salient, which is also a multi-partner trust fund that is managed by ODA in collaboration with UNDP and the Peace Building Fund. And that fund really tries to support member states in adopting a comprehensive approach towards tackling armed violence and small arms and light weapons control. So it addresses both the supply side and the demand side of small arms and light weapons. Salient works with the resident coordinator system in supporting the UN country teams on small arms control and violence prevention. And the aim is to integrate weapons and ammunition considerations into the common country analysis that also Daniel mentioned, and the UN Sustainable Development Cooperation frameworks, so that we really integrate those weapons and ammunition management activities and consideration into development policies and practices at the national level. There have been 3 countries in which Salient funded activities have been piloted. Those include Cameroon, Jamaica, and South Sudan. And for 2023 and 2024, 5 new countries have been selected under this trust fund. Next slide, please. So now what I would like to go into a little bit more detail is some of the programs and projects that we are implementing, and those are supporting the international frameworks and instruments. So first, we have a EU-funded project, which is supporting the implementation of the Program of Action and the International Tracing Instrument for the next 3 years. And this project is taking a 3-pillar approach. So on the one hand, at the global level, it advances global policies and commitments in the context of the 4th review conference that Melanie has mentioned this morning, which will be held in June 2024. And here, together also with UNIDIR, there have been a series of expert discussions that have been held at the international level. And next year, we will be holding further regional consultation in preparation of this review conference to discuss relevant and emerging topics to the POA. So this includes international cooperation assistance, development in small arms and light weapons control, linkages with between small arms and light weapons and sustainable development, technology, and also voluntary national target setting. Secondly, we are supporting the implementation of the POA and ITI based on national and regional priorities. So this also where the regional consultations come in, but also our regional centers are providing tailored assistance at the national and regional level. And thirdly, within that project or program, we are supporting gender responsive small arms control, including through dedicated workshops on this issue. Next slide, please. I won't go into detail here, just to mention that for the REFCON 4, there will be a dedicated sponsorship program for national authorities from developing states or those most affected by illicit small arms control to be able to join the conference in New York. Next slide. Just briefly to highlight, and I think most of you are aware of our guidance, but there is the modular small arms control implementation compendium, which really tries to operationalize and provide good practices based on the international instruments, so the POA, ITI, the Firearms Protocol, and the ATT, and of course, reinforcing other regional standards and guidelines, with the objective that the UN, in providing assistance, sings from the same hymn sheet and so delivers high quality advice on small arms control. Next slide. And then we have discussed, I think, quite a lot this morning about the new global framework for through-life conventional ammunition management and what we have at the international level to support the implementation of this new framework is the UN Safeguard Program. It has been established already in 2011, but now with the new global framework will need to be further expanded and strengthened to cover the whole through life approach that the global framework is promoting. In terms of operationalization, we have kind of 4 main pillars. One is the management of the IATG, the International Ammunition Technical Guidelines, which currently focuses heavily on physical security and stockpile management. So there will be a dedicated work over the next years to develop dedicated security-related guidance to cover all other stages of the through life cycle of ammunition management. Then in the global framework, you may have seen, there is a request to the Secretariat to establish a global assistance mechanism. So we will, in the next year, in a consultative process, have to design together with other UN entities this new assistance mechanism so that it can be operationalized and that states can offer and request assistance through that dedicated assistance mechanism. But in the meantime, we do have established together with the GICHD, the Ammunition Management Advisory Team in 2019, through which UNODA can already provide dedicated assistance on safe and secure ammunition management. We do have a series of training activities on ammunition management. I won't go into detail, but one thing that is important for the global for the new global framework is that there is a request to establish a new fellowship training program on conventional ammunition management, which will be operationalized starting in 2025, 2026, and which will focus also on through-life conventional ammunition management, and that will be actually implemented in the regions. And then there is as Melanie mentioned this morning, there is a dedicated follow-up and review process for the global framework. And so the UN Safeguard Program, together with other stakeholders, will support the regional, the international follow-up meetings that are going to happen in 2025 and 2027, and then hopefully and likely this will be a repeated meeting that will happen at the international level. Next slide, please. And then I just wanted to highlight that, of course, there are, UNODA has regional centers for peace and disarmament, and they are providing as well dedicated regional assistance on weapons and ammunition management, focusing on promoting the universalization and implementation of various arms control instruments. They're also promoting regional and sub-regional cooperation, as also Pierre mentioned this morning with regards to the Caribbean Firearms roadmap, as well as with the Central American roadmap. And then they provide tailored capacity building and technical assistance. So we have 3 regional centers in Latin America and the Caribbean, in Africa, and in Asia Pacific. Next slide. And then just some concluding reflections also based on the discussions today and the guiding questions that we have received. I think what has come out also from today is the importance of the regional level to support the implementation of global commitments, either through dedicated legally binding instruments that are developed at the regional level, or regional commitments, including through regional through regional action plans or roadmaps. And I think this is important because it ensures that it really addresses the challenges at the regional level related to weapons and ammunition. And this is certainly also something that the global framework has put a lot of emphasis on. For national implementation efforts, one thing that was also mentioned earlier this morning was that the new Agenda for Peace of the Secretary General provides us with an opportunity and especially also a mechanism to further promote integrating weapons and ammunition management into national plans and strategies, not only as they relate to security, but also conflict prevention, women, peace and security, and community violence reduction, and then really trying to address both the supply side and the demand side of the issue of small arms. So if we look at how this can be done, I think one avenue that has been identified already is promoting inclusion of weapons and ammunition in common country analysis and the UN Sustainable Development Cooperation frameworks, as well as in mandates of peacekeeping and special political missions, to really ensure the operationalization of weapons and ammunition management. And I think this will also help at the national level, promote collaboration and cooperation on assistance by the UN, and to ensure that WAM assistance is considered from various angles, as Simonetta said, from DDR, SSR, and also criminal justice responses. I think also something that we have learned from kind of the joint project with DPO and the DDR section is that there's really a need to also strengthen the awareness and capacity of UN staff in the missions or in country and regional offices on analyzing the role of weapons and ammunition in a specific context, but also on what actually guidance exists at the international level that they can use, and what are the relevant international and regional frameworks and instruments that apply. So I think today is really a good opportunity to discuss further avenues of how we can promote a more comprehensive and coordinated approach to WAM, and to see how different stakeholders can work closely together to provide assistance on weapons and ammunition at the regional and national level to address both the supply and the demand side of weapons and ammunition. Thank you.
Thank you so much, dear Nora, and for sharing this presentation and contribution to the side event. I think that with this, there has been a lot shared, further food for thought as well. We'll have an opportunity later on this afternoon, as I mentioned, to revert also back and deepen conversations and exchanges on some of these important points and developments that have been shared. But from our side, from my side, I do wish to first again note the questions that are in the online forum. We have taken note of them, and also we will revert back to these, some coming from national representatives and focal points, which there will be the opportunity also during the next session of the symposium, and the other questions as well. We're looking forward to reverting back to them. And with that, what remains is for me to very sincerely thank the representatives and experts and speakers and colleagues from the United Nations, UNMAS, UNSMIL, UNDPO, OROLSI, the SSR unit and the DDR section, UNODC and UNODA. With that, we will conclude the side event with thanks again, and we will move immediately to the next session within 3 to 5 minutes.